So there are 5 things you can do to turn your content into a magic money tree. How do I know they work? Because that's what I've been able to do over the past 4 years. I've turned my online coaching business and my content into $2 million of income, and for my clients over $5 million in tracked wins. And so you are showing up, you're posting, might be getting engagement, some wins, clients coming through here and there, but you know you can get more from it, right? And it's not because your content is bad, but it's because there are a few subtle changes and details you need to fix that when you do fix them, you can turn your content into a magic money tree. And so in this video, I'm going to break down those 5 things. And so let's get started with number 1. Number 1 is that your content lacks contrast, right? And so contrast is all about ideas. It's all about opinions. And it doesn't mean you just simply say what your opinion is. It's that you need to really be able to plant your flag on certain sides of an argument, and speak about that in your content. And so I'll give you a few examples. So for me, one of the ideas is sales calls versus no sales calls, right? And so I used to be a big believer in doing sales calls, and so a couple of years ago, that's the idea that I would push. That's the contrast that I would sell, right? And I would be pushing the idea of you can't sell high ticket without sales calls, and that's what I truly believed right at the time. And so that's something that I was, it's like a hill I would die on, basically. That's how you want to think about it. Is what are the ideas, what are the opinions that you have about your industry, about your niche, about how you get results for people or how you shouldn't get results. What are the things you believe in enough that you would quite literally die on a hill, right? Because you believe in it that much. And so for me, now it used to be you have to have sales calls. Now I understand and believe that you don't need to have sales calls. And that's an idea that I believe in, that I speak about in my content, right? And so that's just one example. And I think that the problem you have is that, there are certain things you believe in, certain things you don't believe in, but you don't speak about them strongly enough, right? Or at least directly enough. Maybe you tiptoe around it, you mention it here and there, but you need to aim for a reaction, right? And when a reaction means that you have people respond and comment or DM you who don't agree, right? And so one of the big metrics of success and a big metric of knowing your content has contrast, it's not about getting more people buying from you, but it's getting more people disagreeing. And the more you can get people to disagree, the more you will get people to agree, even more so, right? Because you don't want people to just, they like your content, they somewhat agree with what you say. You want to build essentially a cult-like following, a cult-like feeling around what you believe in. And that's only possible when you create contrast, right? And contrast comes from ideas, it comes from opinions, and you have to embed that into every single piece of content, every single asset and material you put out there. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything for you, pretty much. So that's the first one. Number 2 is that right now, you think that you think that education equals value. And so whenever you're trying to help people, whenever you're trying to deliver value in some way, you prioritize education, you prioritize information, tips, advice, and things of that nature. And if you go back a few years, especially sort of COVID time, then it worked, right? That is the content that I grew my page from. That's the content that many people grew their page from. And it's what people were looking for, right? Because back then we didn't have as much content online. We didn't have as much free information. We didn't have AI and ChatGPT that could, in an instant, do all of it for us. But we have those things now. And so right now in today's industry, in the landscape today, value, education, that type of value, it's not really worth anything anymore because it's so readily available that anything you say, any advice you can give, most likely can be found online somewhere. And so the type of value you have to focus on, it can still be educational, but it's rooted in stories. It's rooted in your lived experience, right? So for me, I grew my audience with educational content, 100%, right? That's what I grew it from. I went from 0 to 100,000 followers about 9 months, right? But I struggled to sell anything because my value was purely rooted in education. And so I done two things. I attracted an audience of people of, quite frankly, freebie seekers, right? Because they liked my free content. That's all they saw me as, was someone who gave free advice and free material. But also it gave people then permission to not take action because they believed that the thing they needed more of was more information, because that's the only thing I ever gave people was information. And so when you train your audience to expect information from you, then they're never going to take action because they believe that the action they should be taking is looking for more information, right? And if that's free information, then you can kind of very quickly see how that gets you stuck in a loop. And so you need to understand that value, at least now especially, I mean always, but more so now, is there's so much noise, right? There's so much noise, there's so much disagreements and debate around how to do certain things. And linking back to the first point, right, so many ideas and opinions on what to do, that the true value comes from not telling people, not kind of trying to teach people, but essentially showing people the path, right? Showing people the path from where they are right now to where they want to get to. That eye-opening kind of clarity you can give people, that's the value, right? Because we get so stuck on what we could do, the options of growing the business, getting more clients, making more money. There's so many things you could do, but it's been able to show people the best path forward for them, giving them that aha moment. That's what true value is, right? More so now than it ever has been. Moving on to number 3. Third point is that you are focused too much on problems than you are symptoms. And there's a difference there. So problems typically have labels, right? And so I'll give an example, the example I always give. Let's say someone who has like a gut problem. Let's say that gut problem is IBS, right? So they have IBS and they would literally say, I have IBS. IBS is the label, right? That's the problem that they have. The problem is a diagnosis. It's probably a good way to say it. And so you market towards that. Now, obviously, the problem you have there is that the people that respond to that are only the people who identify with the label, right? So only people who identify with having IBS will respond to that label. But also, the label itself is a very broad label. The problem is a very broad problem, right? IBS can mean many things for people. It has many different symptoms for people. And then that kind of leads into the point, which is the symptoms is what creates the connection in your content and drives people to want to take action, because symptoms are not labels. Symptoms are real lived experiences, right, that happen in the moment. They're things that are undeniable. And so when you can label and pinpoint the symptoms that someone experiences, that's when you create connection with your content. That's when you create content where someone says, you're in my head, or how do you know that about me? It's symptoms, it's not problems. And so the example problem would be IBS. Symptom would be that every time they eat pasta, they get stomach pain within 10 minutes, right? So you can kind of play around with what those symptoms and problems look like for you and your business. And what I'd recommend is just do a quick exercise, piece of paper. On the left-hand side is problems, so labels, and then the right-hand side is what are the symptoms of each of those problems. And then all you do is those symptoms go into your hooks. Those symptoms go into your examples, onto your sales page, your landing page, thumbnails and titles, whatever else it is. You use symptoms rather than problems. Moving on, number 4 is that your content has no goal. So content strategy is one thing, right? Knowing what your content pillars are, knowing what the topics you want to speak about are, that's one part of it. Most people are posting blind, right? Most people are posting and they assume that just having a call to action is enough, right? And it's not, right? You need to have in your mind an ideal pathway between a stranger to them becoming a client, and your content really is the directory for that, right? And so your content does serve many functions, but one function is it has to direct people to the next step. And so your content is not trying to completely sell someone on working with you, right? It's all of your content and assets combined is what does that for you. But the individual piece of content, its only goal is to push people to the next step. And for most people posting content, you haven't clarified what that next step is or what it should be for you. And so, for example, it might just be you're directing them to a YouTube video, right? It might be you're directing them to your email list or to a lead magnet or to a VSL to work with you, right? But there needs to be a goal, and that goal has to be part of a wider pathway that people follow to work with you. So just simply randomly sending people places, it kind of defeats the object. It needs to be carefully crafted that you know that from this post to the next step, it's leading them along a journey of going from a stranger to becoming a client, right? It's a pretty simple one, but it's one that many people miss. And so I have to mention it because I just see it all the time, and it annoys me because it's very simple, but it makes a big difference, right? When you know that your content should be directing people to a certain place, right? If you imagine it, a bit like a wheel on a bike that has like all the spokes, but all the spokes lead back to the same place, right? And so your content should do the same. Your content can lead to different things. It can point people to different assets and materials, but ultimately the end goal is to send people to the same place, right? The pathway to that might look different, but each path leads back to the same place nonetheless. And so moving on to the final point, number 5, is that you're just too broad. And so by too broad, I mean that you are focused on, it's not about niche, right? It's not, the issue is not that you are speaking about different things, because you can speak about different things. The issue is that you're speaking about too many things that don't link to one another, or again, that don't link back to a core topic. And so you need to focus on, I would say, look, 3, 4, 5 core topics. Now, again, is this your content pillars? Maybe it is, but I don't think you necessarily have to think of it that way. I went through an exercise, and again, I recommend this for you. Go through your past content over the past 6 months and find your best performing content. Best performing in terms of engagement, reach, likes, saved shares, but importantly, what got you the most leads, and ideally what got you the most clients. And what you're looking for is the pattern in the topics of what that content is about. So for me, I had a look, and there was a few things that popped up, right? There was about 5 topics that just repeatedly come up, and a couple of them were like, educational content, going viral, selling without sales calls, right? They're kind of, for me, the topics that repeat themselves very often. And so it's not that you can't speak about other things, right? So for me, like, for example, let's say talking about hiring a team. It's another topic that I don't really speak about that often. So it's not that I can't speak about that. I can speak about that, but I have to link it back to the core topics that people actually care about. And you'll find that the topics people care about tend to be the topics that are the most pressing problems for them now, which again, it seems simple. It seems like things that you'll be doing anyway, but a lot of time it's not. A lot of the time you're speaking about too many topics, and the topics you do speak about are topics that are too far ahead, right? Meaning that they are problems and subjects that they will care about, but only after solving certain topics and problems first. And so you want to, number one, condense the number of topics you speak about down to 3, 4, 5 core topics. Anything beyond that you speak about, you have to then link them back to the core topics, and as a result, link that back to 1 or 2 core kind of transformations that you help your clients to achieve. And just by doing that alone, again, it might sound like you're being restrictive to yourself, to somewhat you are, but you're just making sure you're always linking back to core transformations, core topics. So you can, in theory, speak about anything you want to, but you must link them always to those core topics. And so if you do that, speak about whatever you want, but just link it back to the things that people actually care about and the things that actually get people to buy and to reach out to you. And if you're not sure what it is for you, it might be worth looking at other people who are doing well in your industry, and you might find they speak about a lot of the same things often. If that's the case, that's probably what's working for them, and it probably will work for you. And so 3 to 5 things. A lot of it is not rocket science. A lot of this might be reminders more than it is lessons, at least for some of you anyway. But it's been able to bring all of these together into a coherent piece of content, and obviously an overall content strategy that really does make a difference. And so probably last thing to mention is that a lot of these problems, strangely enough, originate from your offer. you know, and that's where a lot of content problems come from. It's not the content itself, and it's not your fault. It's just that your offer is not clear, or who you're serving is not clear, the outcome's not clear, many things. But the offer is the core, it's the root of everything. And so actually when you fix your offer, and that doesn't mean rebuilding it, it just means repositioning it. When you fix that, then everything else, like your content, like your marketing, like your sales process, becomes that much easier. And so I actually have below this video free GPT. Just click on the link, you can get it literally now. It takes a couple minutes to do, and essentially what it will do, it will help you to refine and restructure the existing offer you have, so that you then have much more clarity on, number one, where the bottlenecks are in your business, but number two, actually how to position it properly to get more clients. And when you know how to position the offer properly, that, like I said, feeds into your content strategy, feeds into the hooks you use, the topics you talk about, the symptoms you refer to, all the things I've mentioned here today, all comes from your offer. And so the link for that is down below. Up on the screen somewhere will also be another video that, if you found this useful, you're probably going to find that one useful as well. Other than that, I'm going to go back to relaxing, enjoying my time in this hot sun in the forest. But yeah, other than that, appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.